What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? I would like to welcome you all to another edition of Wayne's Perspective, where we operate in discipline, decency, integrity, and respect. And I'm coming through with another video just for you. Before I get started, I hope everyone is doing okay out there, taking every day one day at a time, living life the best way you know how. As for me, I'm doing okay over here, can't complain too much. I'm also taking every day one day at a time and living life the best way I know how as well. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's video, which is going to be a 3-in-1 reaction video courtesy of Clay Kane. Shout out to him. Mrs. Reese Colbert, shout out to her. And Jason Johnson, shout out to him. Now, most of you listening to this already know what the political scene is right now. The Republicans control the White House. The Republicans control the House of Representatives by the slimmest of margins. And the Republicans control the Senate. And they pretty much control the Supreme Court too. And with all this being said, there's this renewed focus on every single thing that the Democrats do and every single thing that the Democrats say. Before I continue, I just want to make a few points clear to those who may be listening to me for the first time. I am a Democrat. I make no secret about that. I try to be as fair and authentic as possible regarding my views and thoughts and feelings and critiques, criticisms, etc., etc. But at the same time, I could come off a little biased too. I have no problem admitting that. The issue that I have is that when you consider everything that's been happening for the last, 15, 20 years, it seems like the Democrats catch a lot of smoke as the Republicans catch little to no smoke. And let me explain another position that I've explained on several videos before. Everyone should be doing more. I don't know how many times I have to say it. The Democrats should be doing more. The Republicans should be doing more. And those who identify themselves as independents should be doing more. It should not be up to just the Democrats to solve every single major problem and every single minor problem that there is in this country. And I will say this once again, too. I do know that the Democrats are mostly associated and closely associated with the black community. That's been the case for decades now. So naturally, when the Democrats falter in one area or don't follow up with what they say they're going to do, they're going to catch smoke for that, and rightly so. You do want to hold your elected officials accountable for the things that they don't do, and hell, for the things that they also do. I got no issues with that. However, it shouldn't be up to just the Democrats to solve every major problem. Everyone should be held accountable, and it brings me back to the whole thing that I said a few moments ago. The Democrats, the Republicans, and the independents should be doing more. I will say this too. As I speak right now, from top to bottom, there needs to be a reshuffling of the deck when it comes to the Democratic Party across the board. And I think even the party knows this. Are we going to get there? That remains to be seen. But when you look at how things have been for the last several months, and some would say the last several years, a shakeup is in order. And I agree with that. The ultimate thing that I want to discuss here is that, again, it seems like there's this renewed focus on every single thing that the Democrats say, every single thing that the Democrats do. So much so that you think that the Democrats are in power right now, which is not the case. And not only that, but like I say, the Republicans get little to no pushback. As we speak, they do get pushback, but it's not as strong as it is when it's the Democrats. All of us can see that. And not only that, but Stephen A. Smith, we're going to talk about him in 2 videos. He has such strong smoke for the Democrats, but rarely said anything about the Republicans. So that's going to be the premise of today's video. Like I said, 3-in-1 reaction video. Fair usage for all 3 videos. And again, I want to give a shout out to Clay Kane, Reese Colbert, and Jason Johnson. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and get my screen shared, and we're going to take a look at the first video.
I'm going to say something, folks may not like it, but y'all ask for more receipts from frickin' Democrats who do good shit versus Republicans who do horrible shit.
Facts.
I mean, it's stunning to me.
That's true. You gotta speak on
Kamala
that.
Harris, if a Kamala Harris administration fired allegedly 300 FAA workers and there was multiple plane crashes in 2 weeks,
Oh, that would be a hard
they'd impeach her.
Y'all hear that? Already, we 32 seconds into the video and they're already speaking facts. Those are some damn good points, and let me touch on them. Can you imagine if this was a Harris administration and these things were happening? Number one, that's like he said towards the end, if there were planes falling out of the sky and there were issues at the FAA, they'll be talking impeachment quickly. I mean, they wouldn't be able to shut up about it. And speaking of not being able to shut up about it, imagine if she came into office and was laying off / firing all these people. Oh my goodness, the response would be enormous. Everybody would be talking about it. Of course, the Democrats would be scrambling trying to answer for it, but the Republicans would be on every station that they can possibly find talking about how it's un-American, how it's unconstitutional, and they're going to be drawing up articles of impeachment as well. Again, the GOP can do this, and yes, they catch some flack, they catch some outrage and all of that stuff, but it's not as strong as it would be if this was done under a Democratic president. Everybody can see that.
For real.
And you have Democrats voting to impeach her as well.
Yep.
Like, I've laid this out in my book. At the end of the grift, I laid out how that we have to celebrate our wins, because we'll turn a win into a loss. They'll turn a loss into a win.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And that right there is a very good point, and that comes with messaging. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later in the video, but that's a damn good point from Clay Kane. The Republicans are good at that. The Democrats are lousy at that, and that needs to change, along with a restructuring from top to bottom in terms of leadership and where people are positioned.
100%.
And so, receipts. Well, is anybody going to ask for the receipts? Is anybody going to demand? Is anybody going to call for it? Because, metrics don't matter under Biden and Harris.
That's true. It's how people feel.
It's how people feel. Yeah. It's how we feel. Unemployment rate didn't matter. Pulling us out of COVID didn't matter. The Inflation Reduction Act didn't matter, even though it gave money to farmers. Farmers who now can't get that money.
Ooh.
Like, it didn't matter. So this is the conundrum that I always come to.
Yeah.
Democrats are far from perfect, but when they get shit right, no one can even acknowledge it. So where y'all at?
That's a damn good point. When Democrats get shit right, it's hardly acknowledged. That comes back to the messaging. And I know I said a few moments ago I'm going to talk about that towards the end of the video, but I want to go ahead and speak about it now. You heard all of the stuff that he mentioned when it came to pulling us out of COVID, and the metrics and all that don't matter, and that comes back to messaging. When it comes to accomplishments like that, yes, a large part of the population are online and get their information online, but you still don't want to base it on just that. You do need to be out there celebrating those accomplishments and taking them to every single place that you can to let the voters know what's happening. Because if they don't see that, then they don't know. And that is one issue that I did have with the Biden administration. They had a ton of wins, but only the people who were really clued in, if you will, knew about those wins, but the other people didn't know about that. So when that happens, it creates a scene where most of the voters don't know what your accomplishments are. They will have to dig and dig and dig to see what they are. But again, it comes down to messaging. It really does. And that plays a role, because you can damn well bet that if those things happen under a Republican administration, they're going to turn those into wins. You can't just have accomplishments and not talk about them and not celebrate them. It's as simple as that, man.
Folks set up forgiving billions of dollars in student loan debt didn't matter. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act didn't matter.
And let me say this too. You playing yourself if you think none of that stuff matters. See, it doesn't matter if it's done under a Democrat administration, but it'll be a big damn news story if it's under a Republican administration. Help me make this make sense, y'all.
Oh,
that's true, because all we heard was, look at what the Asians got. Look at what the Asians got.
Yeah.
Let me stop it again. Reese Colbert is on point, because yes, for damn near 4 years, that is what we heard. Look at what the Asians got. Look at what this group of people got. We heard that for 4 years. And quite frankly, I heard that and seen that on certain YouTube videos as well. I'm not going to call any names, but yeah, we heard that. We definitely heard that to a point where it was becoming annoying. The Asians got a crime bill. What did the black people get? And all this other stuff. I mean, we heard it constantly.
I heard more. Look at what the Asians got. They did not let us live that shit down. Yet the first order of business of Donald Trump is eradicating civil rights, or overturning a 1964 executive order on affirmative action in federal contracting, and you barely heard boo. Like, what?
Exactly. Where was the outrage about that? Don't get me wrong, there was some outrage amongst us, quote unquote us, but you didn't hear about it. Or in this case, there was some outrage, but it wasn't as strong. And that's the point that I'm making. When it comes to certain things, the outrage is at a fever pitch. But when it comes to other things, there's barely a peep. That's crazy.
I'm confused. It's so disproportionate, the responses.
I can't get my mind around it. So, but you know what it is, Reese? She didn't say explicitly that America was a racist country. That's what it is. You know what it is, Reese? She went on The View and didn't explicitly say the difference her and Joe Biden have. Like, oh, that must be what it all. That's why nobody has receipts now. That must be what it is.
And that's a good point right there. Let me touch on that too. When it came to Kamala Harris, and here we go talking about the campaign again, quite frankly, I'm still talking about it, but let's keep it going. It seemed like everything that Kamala did or didn't do, it wasn't good enough. There was this whole talk about, well, she need to be out there doing this. She need to be out there doing that. She need to make her rounds here. She need to make her rounds there. She need to do this show. She need to do that show, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then when she did that, it still wasn't good enough. And then going back to that part about The View, when they ask a question about what's going to differentiate you from Joe Biden. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall any other presidential candidate getting a question like that, and I certainly don't recall any Republican candidates getting questions like that. For example, I don't recall John McCain, God rest his soul, being asked, what's going to differentiate you from George W. Bush? I don't recall that. But why do it seem like the Democrats get these questions? And of course, you know, with the microscope, or should I say the political microscope being on Miss Harris so much that when she did answer to the fact of saying that my administration is going to be different from Joe Biden's, that wasn't good enough. Do you need like a 5 or 10 point plan showing how you're going to be different? Now, I get it. You do want to speak on that a little bit more. You don't want to give a vague answer. I get that. But why does it have to be a Democrat being asked the question, what's going to separate you from your predecessor? Now, we all know that she was his vice president. So naturally, yeah, you're going to be held accountable for the things that happen under his administration. But why such focus on what's going to separate you from Joe Biden? Obviously, it's not going to be the same thing. She wasn't going to carry on his same policies, maybe some of them, but not all of that. But like I said, that's not good enough for some people.
Oh, well, you ain't hearing shit about how horrible Trump's Gaza policy is. Oh my God, where Gaza. All the flags at? Where are all the free Palestine?
Can you imagine if Lloyd Austin would have said something, even not even if Biden said it, if Lloyd Austin would have said, well, Gaza, you know, it's very beautiful there, you know, it's by the sea. Biden would fire Lloyd Austin in a minute.
And it'll be a big damn news story too. Bet your ass on that.
I mean, can you imagine if Jill Biden was selling Bitcoins of herself or whatever those crypto coins are? Like, I mean, this is where I get so frustrated because I will hold Democrats to the fire completely. I will hold them to the fire. But God damn it, it pisses me off that Republicans are never held to the fire.
Never.
It's just stunning to me.
Yeah.
Like, as much as I get upset and I feel like, you know, they're not out there enough, I'm like, well, I mean, it's just it's the playbook is so imbalanced.
It is.
It is imbalanced. I want to ask legit question. The reason why there's less of a pushback towards the Republicans and more of a pushback to the Democrats, is it because the voters themselves tend to fear the Republicans but will fight the Democrats tooth and nail? And I'm talking figuratively, not literally. Is that what it is, or is it something else that we're not privy to? That's a question I want to ask you all. Okay, now they spent a good portion of the video in the middle talking about Eric Adams, but I wanted to skip over that and I wanted to get to what they talked about at the end, and that's when Joe Biden was ousted last year. Let me talk about that again. Even as I discuss that right now, I'm still not really sure where I stand on that. Now, at the time, I said that Joe Biden should have stayed in the race, and I still think he had a good chance to defeat Donald Trump a second time. With hindsight being 2020 and all, I'm still not sure where I stand, but I do remember what the coverage was after that debate that he and Trump had in June. And again, that was like 3 weeks, or as Clay Kane said, well, no, I take that back. I think it was 3 weeks. I don't think it was a months-long campaign to oust Joe Biden, and everybody was talking about it. That one debate performance just upended everything, and Trump was no better. Trump may have spoken better, but he still was himself. He still lied and spouted a bunch of nonsense, but all that focus was on Joe Biden. Should he stay in? Should he step down? Is he in cognitive decline? Is he having a mental breakdown, or whatever the case may be? We heard it, and it was in the news every single day since that debate, all the way up until the time that he said that he was stepping down and pretty much endorsing Kamala to be his successor. And then when you look at it a little further, I've been talking about this recently as well. The Democratic Party is such a big tent party. And when I was talking earlier about there needing to be a restructure and a reorganization from top to bottom, they need to do something about that as well, because as long as it's a big tent party, which I understand why it is, as long as they keep it going like that and have all these competing interests, you're going to get similar results, and nothing is going to become accomplished, and it's not going to become the strong party that it should be. I also say this too. The only time I give the Republicans credit in this instance is that they're going to stick with their nominee no matter how toxic and dangerous he is. But with the Democrats, it's like nobody is ever good enough. And I said this part in a previous video, and I'm going to say this right now. When it came to the campaign last year, now we can talk about the optics, if you will, that there was no primary or whatever. And as Reese mentioned on one of these videos, and I believe it's going to be the video that I'm going to talk about next, she mentioned that the data wasn't there to support the candidates. And when we're talking about data, we're talking about the numbers that will allow a challenge to Joe Biden. Now, I don't believe that the Biden administration or anybody else pretty much told whoever to not run. I don't believe that, because if that was the case, we would have seen something about it by now. We're almost in mid-March 2025. So I don't believe that. But the fact of the matter is, if there was anybody serious enough to challenge Joe Biden, they would have stepped forward and mounted a challenge, but there was no challenge. And then to further prolong what I'm saying right here, no one would have been good enough. Follow me. It's almost like the talking points were Joe Biden shouldn't stay in because of his age and his sagging poll numbers. It shouldn't be Kamala Harris because of whatever. It shouldn't be Joe Manchin because he's in tight with the fossil fuel companies. It shouldn't be Jasmine Crockett because she's too black. It shouldn't be AOC because she's too progressive. It shouldn't be Bernie Sanders because of his age. It shouldn't be Cory Booker because he wouldn't be able to galvanize the people. It shouldn't be Elizabeth Warren because of whatever. You see what I'm saying? It's like everybody has something to say. No one is going to be fully satisfied. No candidate is perfect. We'll never have a perfect candidate. And like I've said before, Trump damn sure is not perfect. Biden was not perfect. Obama wasn't perfect. Clinton wasn't perfect. Bush 41 and Bush 43 weren't perfect. Reagan wasn't perfect. Jimmy Carter wasn't perfect. Nixon wasn't perfect. Gerald Ford, John F. Kennedy, all them cats, none of them were perfect. We're never going to have a perfect candidate. Never in this lifetime. Like I said, the Republicans, give them credit. They'll stick with their nominee, but the Democrats, is always this criteria that you have to meet even before you get over the finish line. And even if you meet all the criteria, it still may not be good enough for some. It's crazy. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and get started with the second video. And this one right here should be interesting as well, because this one, just like the third video, is going to focus on Stephen A. Smith. And you see what this says here. Stephen A. Smith slams Biden and Kamala Harris and says, Dems pick candidates for the American people. Okay, we're going to take a look at this. Let's go ahead and get to it.
Stephen A. Smith has some thoughts, and, I think it's important to push back on misinformation. He has some thoughts on the Democratic Party candidates. Listen to this.
Because y'all are too busy trying to pick candidates for the American people instead of listening to the American people tell you who they want. The last Democrat that the American people told you they wanted was Barack Obama. Hillary Clinton, it's her turn. Bernie Sanders had momentum. It's Hillary's turn. Joe Biden captured momentum because Representative Clyburn got involved in South Carolina, saved us behind, but it's really, really his turn, okay? He has no business running for re-election, but everybody went for it, knowing he was supposed to be transitional. He's going to be 81 years of age. Then you sit up there. He doesn't have a primary. Then he goes on the debate stage, embarrasses himself. Then y'all still let him take 3 damn weeks to walk away instead of getting the hell out there immediately so you can see if there's somebody other than Kamala Harris who could be the Democratic nominee. Then she gets the nomination and everybody wants to act like she's the rock star all of y'all wanted all along. Oh, my God, let's throw up our hands and just say, hey, she is the one. When you know good and damn well that wasn't the truth.
And you hear his voice, you hear how quote unquote passionate he is. Like I said, that verbal smoke, when they talking about the Democrats, that's how they sound. Stephen A. Smith sounds like that. Charlamagne the God and others like them, they sound like that with this verbal vigor, like they got blood in their eyes and they just so either angry or frustrated or a little bit of both. You hear it in his voice. But again, why all this smoke for the Democrats and less smoke for the Republicans? And I think when we get to the third video, we may have an answer. But let's go ahead and see what Clay Kane and Reese Cobra have to say.
A little bit of fact checking here. This idea that Obama was the last Democratic president where the American people chose him. First of all, I'm old enough to remember when Oprah was vilified because they said, how dare you choose for the American people who our next president should be? You were using your star power. You were using your celebrity to choose the next president. She was vilified for that. And the narrative was that our president was chosen by, our president was chosen by a millionaire, billionaire, whatever her status was back then. Because if you recall, she was campaigning during the primaries. She had never endorsed a president before. For our younger listeners, that might be surprising, but Oprah's level of star power was even beyond Beyonce. It was out of this world. So there were people that said Oprah has interfered in our political process. So that doesn't make any sense to me. And Obama mollywopped Hillary Clinton during the primaries. Right?
To be fair, there was a time where Hillary Clinton was leading President Obama in the popular vote, but it was the super delegates that put him over, and she ended up dropping out. So he did
Super Tuesday. He did.
Yeah, he ended up beating her in the popular vote barely, but she had already dropped out.
Right.
When he,
exactly.
So people just ended up voting for him anyway. But there was actually a time when, if you were going strictly by the votes cast, that actually it was Hillary Clinton that was winning in the 2008 primary. Now, I was a Barack Obama supporter, so I wasn't mad at it. But I'm just saying, if we're doing the real math, that's really how it went for a vast majority until she dropped out.
Yeah. And the idea that, Biden was somehow installed and not chosen by the American people, Biden was not doing well in the polls, and Clyburn can endorse who he wants to endorse. I mean, and Biden won.
That is true. And let me step in here for a little bit. Biden wasn't installed. And see, here's another thing. When it comes to the Democratic candidate, in this case, he's installed, but Trump won fair and square, right? You see how they do? Let's keep it going.
He won.
Right.
He won. I'll tell you one thing. The last two Democratic presidents that didn't win, they had something in common. They were women.
Right.
But I guess those things don't matter. Maybe that's too quote unquote woke.
Oh, no, it's not too quote unquote woke. And since Clay Kane mentioned that, let me go ahead and throw this prediction out there, because I've also been saying this recently. At some point in American history, we are going to have a female president, but it's not going to be a Democrat. I guarantee you that, because what happened with Hillary Clinton and what happened with Kamala Harris, the first female president that we're going to have in this country is going to be a Republican. They're going to have the messaging, most likely. The Republicans are going to rally around her, and mainstream media is going to do their thing, especially if this woman is white. So that's my prediction. Can I be wrong? We shall see. That's my ultimate prediction. We are going to have a woman president one day, but it's going to be a Republican. It's not going to be a Democrat. And let me address something too, because there's this rumor out there that Kamala Harris may either run for governor of California or she may run again in 2028. I'm not sure where I stand. Would I vote for her again? Yes, I would. But my thing is, even if she does have a full slate to campaign, would these same people right now who are regretting their votes for Trump, would they come out and vote for her, or would the turnout remain the same or be worse? That's my fear right there, because I get studying what you did during the last campaign and not repeating the same mistakes and just coming with a whole different strategy across the board. I understand that. But my thing is, what are you going to do differently? Because like I said, my fear is that either the turnout is going to be the same, she's going to win, but not by much, or the turnout is going to be even less than 2024. Because I'm going to tell you something. If she run again and loses, but loses worse than she did in 2024, oh my goodness, that's going to be bad. But again, we're going to see a female president at some point in American history, but it's going to be a Republican. It's not going to be a Democrat, y'all.
And then now, I guess Stevens feels like, hey, we should have just had that open primary, which that would have went back to our history. What is it called? An open broker primary?
Broker convention, yeah.
Broker convention. Every time you've had a broker convention, that party loses every single time. So this idea that Democratic presidents are installed and whatever the case may be. Now, first of all, the majority of folks don't even vote during a primary. So there's that.
Yeah, about 30% turnout in the primaries.
Exactly. But I just think it's funny. I'm like, really? Oh, wow. So, it just kind of makes me laugh.
Stephen A. Smith does not know shit about politics. Now, if he were saying things that were factually correct, and maybe I just didn't like his take, I would be like, well, I don't agree, but he's not wrong on the facts, but he's saying things that are just flat out not true. And these people had a chance to run. Hillary Clinton ran against Barack Obama. She lost. When all the rules were taken into account, her ass lost. She withdrew her nomination. Okay. Bernie lost to Hillary. Now, Bernie went through every single primary. Okay. He did not drop out before every primary was completed, and he lost to.
Listen to these facts, y'all. Reese Colbert always comes with it, and Clay Kane does too. But check out these facts, y'all, when it comes to the metrics, the data, and all that stuff. Just peep this.
Hillary Clinton
and struggled with black voters over 30. Struggled. So remember when he went to Mississippi and said that Obama made a really bad mistake? Why did Obama, lose Mississippi by such a large margin?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
he's always had race issues because he's class, not race. That's what Bernie Sanders is. Okay. But he went through every single primary in 2016 and lost. Okay. The votes were not there for Bernie. People had an option. They didn't choose him. Okay. In 2020, he went through every single primary. I remember there was Bernie and Joe on that damn stage. They was the last two standing, okay? Because he did not drop out on Super Tuesday. He went all the way through, practically. So Bernie lost fair and square. There was a primary in the 2024 election. Those people lost.
And let me ask y'all this too, as y'all listening. What do you think of the whole primary thing? Did that have any effect on the way that you voted or not? So in other words, what I'm asking is, with or without a primary last year, was that going to change how you voted? Let me know.
Okay, they were never real contenders. Anybody could have ran against Joe Biden if they wanted to, but I've said it before and I will say it again. Not one person had data. And all those people started running for president as soon as President Biden was inaugurated. Not one of those people had data that shows that they could both beat Joe Biden and beat Donald Trump.
That's true. That's what I said at the beginning of the video. The data wasn't dataing, for the lack of a better way to explain that. It just wasn't there. And I don't believe that somebody behind the scenes told any potential candidates to not run. I don't believe that.
That is the sole reason why none of them ran against Joe Biden. If they had polling that said they can beat Joe Biden and Donald Trump, you would have had 20 people running, but they couldn't beat Joe. So they were smart enough to say, I can't beat him, so why run against him? And then I look like an asshole. That's not a coronation. That's just people knowing the facts and the evidence. Okay. So
I guess his perspective is that Biden should have not run for re-election.
that's not how this works. That's not how this works. That's not how politics works. People don't have to not run. You have to beat them.
That's exactly what Stephen A. Smith was saying. He didn't come out and say it in those clips that they played, but that's exactly what his point was.
Yeah.
Anybody can run. Yeah. To be president, all you have to do is be 35 years old and be a natural born citizen. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? So people don't have to step aside for you. You have to beat them. That's how this works. So you don't get to say, well, Joe should have just done that. And because he didn't do that. No, he didn't do that. And nobody was big and badass enough to run against him.
And that's the whole point right there. And you see, going back to the smoke part, it's always what the Democrats should and shouldn't do. Joe Biden need to do this. Kamala Harris need to do that. But on the flip side, do you ever hear these people say, well, Trump needs to do this, J.D. Vance needs to do that? Do you hear them saying this? Right now, as I record this, the consensus is that Trump needs to do something about Elon Musk, I guess. And even then, you don't hear your Stephen A. Smiths and Charlamagne the Gods talking about that now, do you?
So guess what? He was able to run until he couldn't no more. Then it was Kamala. Now, again, if anybody had data to support the idea they can beat both Kamala and Donald Trump, they would not have given a fuck about 44,000 Black women on the call, about Biden saying we going with Kamala. They would have ran against her. But again, they didn't have the data. Because I know they didn't have data because even the public data didn't say that. They obviously, every one of these people would have been Amy Klobuchar, Gavin Newsom, Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmore, all these people, even people to judge, I'm sure, had polling they was doing on the side. And they did not show them ahead. So we got the only feasible path of events that we could have gotten, short of, Biden, dropping out earlier. Everybody did what they did out of self-preservation, not because they were told not to. It's because they couldn't beat the people they needed to beat to be the nominee. And they weren't going to flush their careers down the drain when they can get another crack at it in 4 years when we have a country, or 8 years in some cases. So Stephen A. Smith is completely wrong there. But this whole idea that Bernie, who has now lost,
just get ready to say this,
2 freaking presidential.
We still think Bernie would have won in 2016. Are we still saying that?
And another thing that I noticed is that Bernie Sanders, even though he's doing some good right now with his organizing, he's up there in age too, but I don't hear nobody talking about his age. Hell, I don't hear nobody talking about Donald Trump's age either. They're not spring chickens. And yes, Joe Biden was not a spring chicken either, but they constantly talked about his age. But they ain't saying nothing about Trump's age. They ain't saying nothing about Bernie Sanders' age either. Very, very, very interesting.
9 years later.
Let me just give you some numbers for everybody. Oh, Bernie is so much better. Bernie got less votes than Kamala Harris did in Vermont. Less votes. She got 235,791 votes in Vermont. He got 229,429 votes in Vermont. I'm not talking about nationally. I'm talking about in Vermont. She beat Trump 63.8%. He beat his competitor 63.2%. So somebody explain to me where there's this groundswell of support for Bernie Sanders that would not also be there for Joe Biden, who won the most votes in history, with Kamala Harris on the ticket. That's number one. And then number two, for Kamala Harris, who did better than Bernie in his own damn state, that he's been a senator in the Congress for the past 30 years. And she still got more votes than him. So I need people, your feelings are not valid, but let's step outside of your feelings and your perceptions and shit you pull out your asshole. And let's just look at the data, look at the numbers. Show me polling, show me data, show me votes cast. And then we can have a conversation based on the irrefutable facts of the matter, not just what you think. Okay? Period.
Amen. I agree with all of that. They made some good points, just like they did in the first video. I really don't have too much more to add to this particular video. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and go right into the third and final video. All right. Well, no, hold on. Before I get started with this one, take a look at the title. Undercover Republican Stephen A. Smith sparks backlash again after Joy Reid comments. Let me speak on Joy Reid for a little bit. Was it a sad thing to see her lose her show on MSNBC? Yes, it was. Don't get me wrong, there have been some times where I didn't agree with her, but for the most part, she did her thing in that time slot that she had. And just to see her lose her show along with other people of color on MSNBC, I shudder to think where they may be going in terms of their political direction. I hope they don't try to become CNN light, because that's not going to do any good at all. I would say more than likely she's going to bounce back if she does her own platform on YouTube as well as other social media outlets. I think she's going to be fine. I wouldn't want to see her on CNN or any other news outlet for that matter. I don't want to say too good for CNN, but she doesn't need to go there. I don't think she does. What would make things right is if MSNBC brought her back as well as the other people that were ousted. But I think if that was the case, it would have happened by now. Not sure what direction MSNBC is going in, but hopefully they don't turn out to be CNN light, because if that's the case, you're going to lose more viewers. And one more thing, if they lose Rachel Maddow, then it's a wrap. And with all that being said, we're going to go ahead and go into the third and final video. This one has Jason Johnson in it, and Stephen A. Smith is going to be part of the conversation once again. Let's go.
You know, I want to ask you, I'm almost uninterested to bring this guy's name up.
And speaking of which, look at this comment right here, at Marcus Easley 9882. This guy says, Stephen A. and Charlamagne are doing the same thing. They want so bad to be in political spaces, but neither are smart enough or informed enough on the issues. That's a damn good point right there. And I agree with it 100%.
But I'm asking you,
Stephen A. Smith. I know that's what it is.
The reason why is because you sometimes moonlight. Folks may not know this. You're brilliant analysis, politics, but you sometimes moonlight in sports commentary. But Stephen A. Smith, I'm not gonna play the clip, went on a rant on Joy Reid, and criticized those using race as an excuse of the reason why she got fired. Mind you, I haven't heard Joy Reid screaming racism. I have not heard her say it's just ridiculous.
I haven't heard her say anything about it being racist either. But you cannot discount the fact or discredit the fact that her and the other ones that were either reassigned or let go from MSNBC, none of them were white. Not one. And you notice that Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough, they still have their show. If anything, their show should have been the first one that was canned, but obviously that didn't happen. But no, you cannot hide from the fact that Joy Reid and the others were people of color. None of them were white.
But brought up her ratings, and I've covered this. She was number 7, and there were shows that had worse ratings that didn't get canceled, and so on. But I'm just curious what you think, because his voice is becoming so just louder and louder. And anybody can run their mouth, I guess. Yeah. But I think about there's a lane that he has, and I don't know if he's good in that lane either. I don't know the sports lane. I don't know. But I just wanted to know your thoughts on he seems really in a fever to get more involved in political commentary.
So I want to be absolutely candid about this. I don't know Stephen A. Smith at all personally. I interviewed him maybe once or twice years ago when I was working for The Root. Stephen A. Smith is a quintessential example of the difference between being influential and being known, right? Stephen A. Smith is a very well-known person. When he speaks, people pay attention. He has no real influence. I want to make that clear. He has no real influence in politics.
That's a good point. When he speaks, people listen, but that should only be the case when it comes to sports. I don't think people are checking for Stephen A. Smith and to another extent Charlamagne the God when it comes to political stuff. But let me back up. I think people would check for them to see what they have to say, but only if they bring the smoke to the Democrats. If they say anything regarding the Republicans, I don't think they will get that many ears listening. I don't think. When it comes to the political matters, if they have smoke for the Democrats, yeah, people are going to listen, and that's going to be magnified, especially by the conservative movement. Yeah, they're going to take that and highlight it and pretty much look at it as if to say, look at what one of y'all own is saying about the Democrats, and they'll reach a fever pitch with that. And I'll say this too. In no way am I saying or advocating that Stephen A. Smith and Charlamagne the God sit down and shut up. No, I'm not going to say that. They have a right to speak on these issues just like everybody else. However, they less informed and in most cases have no idea what's going on. But like this commenter said, they want so bad to be in these political spaces. And it's obvious. I think it's obvious to them, even if they don't come right out and say it. Let's keep going.
He desperately wants to have influence in politics. He desperately wants to be considered amongst the same spaces as a Roland Martin or a Bakari Sellers or an Angela Rye or a Tiffany Cross or Abby Phillips. He wants to be in that category. He wants to think that he can actually move the needle. And he is being platformed, unfortunately, by a lot of less than informed journalists who are bored and looking for someone who's making loud noises.
Facts.
But let us be clear about who and what he is at this particular point, which is just a loudmouth person who is desperate to be put into different spaces.
I agree. Definitely, desperately wants to be put in those political spaces. We see that. And to piggyback on something that I was saying earlier, when it comes to sports, he knows his stuff. He does a real good job. Granted, he may have said some controversial things over the years, but based on what I've seen and based on what I've heard, when it comes to sports, he does his thing. Why try to branch off into politics? I have no idea. But why can't you just keep it at sports? And again, I'm not saying stay in your lane, even though it kind of sounds like I am saying that, but still, why get in the political lane?
That's the first thing, right? That's not an insult. Hey, if he hears this, fine, he can. I don't really care. He doesn't have any influence on my life. There's not a politician alive in America who's making their decisions based on what Stephen A. Smith says. Even if Eric Swalwell decides to bring him to Washington, D.C., I've met Eric Swalwell. I'm a fan of his. Eric, don't waste your time, because Stephen A. Smith doesn't represent anybody other than himself and the small number of Republicans and Republican acolytes who are friends of his. And that's the second thing I want to point out. This man is best friends with Chris Christie. He is a Republican. Stephen A. Smith is a Republican. Look at the pictures of him and that crazy human rights abusing police chief, right? Look at all the opportunities that he always takes to attack the Democratic Party. And the issue that I have with him, besides the fact that he's not informed on any of these issues whatsoever, before I even go back to the mistakes he's made in journalism, before I go back to his well-documented history of inappropriate, tacky, and crass comments about women, in particular Black women, before I even get into any of that, I will highlight the fact that Stephen A. Smith is a Republican, and he is too much of a coward, and I will say coward, intellectually and personally, to just admit that on the air. Because the moment that he says he's a Republican, then he can no longer play the game he's playing now, which is, oh, I'm just a Democrat who's disappointed, and now people will pay attention to me.
Good points by Jason. I think the dude is a Republican. He hasn't come right out and say it, but when you base the things that he's said about the Democrats and how hard he brings it for the Democrats and his less than tiptoey verbal maneuvering when it comes to the GOP, the guy's a Republican. He ain't no damn Democrat that's disappointed, because disappointed Democrats don't come with no fire like that. They just don't. And I have no reason to believe that at all. My thing is, if you're a Republican, just come on and say you're a Republican. You're not going to upset me. My reaction is going to be, all right, it's about time you finally admit it, / we kind of already knew that was the case. You only confirming it now. But a disappointed Democrat, hell no. I don't believe that one bit.
Just come out.
That reminds
Just come
me
out,
of
Stephen A.
something.
Smith, and say you're a Republican.
That reminds
It's
me
the
of
grift.
something.
It's the grift. It's your book.
This reminds me.
And I want to make this clear, because as all the people who are talking about Stephen A. Smith running for president, that guy's not going to run for president, right? And
let me stop it right there. Pardon me. No, he's not going to run for president. Number one, he's not going to get the votes. Number two, the Republicans in large numbers, especially the white Republicans, are not going to vote for him. And number three, he doesn't have it in him. That's not his lane. And I hope that nobody is seriously entertaining that. He has less of a chance of even getting on the ballot than Kanye West did. And neither one of them should be nowhere near any type of political office like that. So I hope that that does not gain traction. I hope that was something that he was saying at the very least to troll people. But running for president, no, don't even bother. Just don't bother.
the best way to handle this kind of grift, the best way to handle this kind of disingenuous nonsense is to ignore him. So what that he goes on Bill Maher? Bill Maher has lost credibility with the vast majority of substantive journalists in this America 8 years ago, right? He is a right-winger who's angry because his old comedy routines from the 90s making fun of Muslims don't go over so well at Berkeley anymore. Get some new material, okay? Stephen A. Smith is trying to slowly navigate himself into legitimate spaces in journalism so that he can appear to be credible, so that he can use that to sort of leverage himself against ESPN, which is a dying network like a lot of other things on cable are dying. Listen to him at your peril, Democratic Party, because this man knows nothing. He represents nothing. He is not in contact with a certain segment of the African-American population, and he is making bad faith assessments of the Democratic Party because he is not a Democrat.
That part right there. Making bad faith assessments about the Democratic Party because he is not a Democrat. That is 100% true.
And I'm not saying that as somebody who is a Democratic fan. I'm saying that as somebody who actually cares about this country and not my own personal self-aggrandizement. And I also say this as somebody who actually understands politics.
Yeah, you're very critical of Democrats. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
I don't have any loyalty to Democrats or Republicans. You know, I have none whatsoever.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. Yeah, these kinds of voices, the way they get platformed, it's just, but it's an old school formula.
Yeah.
I just think it's ridiculous. And I mean, if you feel that way, leave Joanne Reed out of it.
Well, but you know what, the deeper thing though, and this is where I have the problem. It's him, it's Marcellus Wiley, it's Jason Whitlock, it's the whole crew of them. All of these people, remember in the late 80s, early 90s when you suddenly had, all of these actors who wanted to sing, right? And I say this as somebody there, when you become prominent and successful in one space, you often have a desire to move into another, right? Rush Limbaugh had already conquered talk radio, but he really wanted to get into sports, right? Rush Limbaugh getting that job on Monday Night Football was his dream come true. Here's the difference though, and people can find this insulting, but it's actually true. Sports is entertainment.
Right.
So my opinion is just as valid as yours as long as I look at the stats. But politics affects real people's lives.
Right.
It's policy. It's the health, future, and protection of this country. So if I'm an opinionated person in politics, like I am a professional legal analyst, I'm a professional political analyst, I'm a host, I have a PhD in political science. The fact that I have sports opinions is fine because it's entertainment. But just because you've conquered sports doesn't mean you know a damn thing about how this country works, how this country can be saved, and what this country needs to do. And people need to understand that being successful in one area doesn't mean you can ice skate in another.
Man, those were some very good points right there. And I'm going to piggyback on what he said before I close this video. Sports is entertainment. That is very, very true. The NFL, that's entertainment. The NBA, that's entertainment. Hockey, baseball, all of them. That's entertainment. Politics should never, ever, ever be viewed as entertainment, because when it comes to policy and things that affects entire communities, entire countries, international matters, etc., that is not entertaining. That is not entertainment. No. And one reason why we're in this position that we're in now as far as a country is that when it came to certain issues last year, yeah, everything was a damn joke until it started affecting real people. But like I said, no political matter should be treated as entertainment. None whatsoever. Sports is entertainment. Politics is real life. It's that simple, y'all. We're going to go ahead and close this video here. Shout out to Jason Johnson. Shout out to Clay Kane. And shout out to Mrs. Reese Colbert. More than likely, I am going to do some more reaction videos like this where I react to more than one video at a time. And on that note, if you like what you heard and you're ready to become part of Team Discipline, go ahead and hit that like button and drop some comments overall. Let me know where you stand on this. And last but not least, hit that subscribe button along with the bell so you're notified when I drop new videos. And until next time, my people, take care of yourselves. And remember, the power of the mind is valuable.